The next video interview that we have is with Henry Kaestner. Henry is a mentor of mine and a successful businessman and a true believer. He takes his faith very seriously and even started a private equity firm around investing into faith-based leaders and businesses. So you'll hear more about his story during this interview, and more importantly, just to hear how he, even though he's a busy guy and he has been CEO of a large company, thousands of employees, he always has this tendency of making you feel like you're the only one in the room in a good way, where he's very intentional about speaking into your life. And so I thought, what a great guy to demonstrate to us and just to reflect on what does it mean to be there, to be fully present with someone and to make them feel heard. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Henry. I'll talk to you soon. So Henry, thanks for taking time out of your day to talk about being there, which just by showing up, you've done what I hope to accomplish, to show the guys that you're being there.
I'm here.
Yeah, you're here. So we don't have to worry about too much of intros, but as you know, we've got this thing called the fellowship. You were gracious enough to be a lunch and learn speaker last year. And so the idea now is that I'm connecting one-to-one with mentors of mine and people that I respect to go over specific traits that I feel like demonstrate what being a provider is. And one of those traits I wanted to touch base with you today about is this habit and trait of being there, being present. And just to share a quick story, the reason I thought of you was because you opened up your house when you guys were living in the Durham, North Carolina area, and you did this monthly meeting called Inklings. And I just thought, man, what a great story to reflect on in the beginning and to find out, to share that with everyone that may not be familiar with Inklings, that you open up your house once a month for young professionals like myself that wanted a little piece of Henry Kaestner to get that wisdom. And I thought, gosh, what a great place to start and to say, what was the genesis of that? What made you say, hey, I want to show these guys that I want to be present in their life by opening my home once a month? Can you take us to that moment where you decided to be there for guys like me?
Wow, that's a great question. That's a great question. And actually, I'm going to move the conversation outside. We've got some workers in the house this morning.
Yep.
That's going to be a little bit of a distraction. And actually, of course, it's all just a ploy for me to think of something good to say. Just buying time. I'm embarrassed to tell you that while I think that it's remarkably important to be there, that's actually been something I've done a poor job of in my life. I've stumbled into it through the grace of God and have understood the joy of being in fellowship and community. But my motives haven't always been as pure as I'd like them to be. What I'd like to say is that I recognize how important it is to be in community, and I wanted to create that space, and it was only for the ability to serve others. There's some aspect in starting Inklings, which is a group that you talk about, which is a matter of let's go ahead and a number of different people want to get together for lunch or get together for dinner or for a drink, and it's hard for me to continue to meet with them just individually. Maybe there's some utility in bringing them all together at the same time. So one of the things that really has been formative in my spiritual life is to try to understand and unpack the question of why. What are my motives? What is shaping my desires? Who am I trying to emulate? All those different types of big meta type of questions have really impacted me. And of course, you guys know about Proverbs. There are 31 of them. That means one for every day in the month. Twice a month, I am reminded that all too often my motives are not pure. 16:2 and 21:2 say, all of a man's ways seem pure to him, but his motives are weighed by the Lord. I would like to tell you that the idea of putting together Inklings was all a great motive, but there's some amount of expediency in putting it together, which is instead of having a number of different meetings during the course of the month, I might be able to have more efficiency and having them all at the same time. Now, through the grace of God, I came to understand after having a couple of them that it was a great blessing for me. And for me, for being there meant that I got to experience more of God through the relationships in the community and the fellowship of being intentional in one place with a whole bunch of different people. And that's something I think that you see really from a lesson from the original Inklings. You know, we named this group called Inklings after C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien and Owen Barfield and others who got together, and they got together once a week, but they got together to encourage each other in the pursuit of faith, family, and vocation. They got to critique each other's work. And of course, out of that came some of the greatest things of the 20th century. And I think there's something really in that. You know, kind of riff on that just a little bit, and then I get back to the program at hand. But there's a great quote that Tim Keller attributes to C.S. Lewis. And he, of course, was very close to J.R.R. Tolkien, who he called Ronnie. One of the Inklings died. And C.S. Lewis talked about the fact that as this person was dying, Lewis thought he'd get more of Tolkien. Because there are 4 or 5 that are very close, and he'd just get more one-on-one time with Tolkien. And he ended up finding out that he actually got less of Ronnie after this guy died. And he got less of him because this other person was able to draw out aspects of Tolkien that Lewis wasn't able to. So we're created in the image of God. We're all his image bearers. And when you bring together a group like you have in your fellowship and your program, or you bring together a group in Inklings, we all collectively as image bearers of God allow each of us to see God more fully. So to be there and to be there for other people means to be with God. If indeed all those people are trying, albeit imperfectly, to experience and to know God, when you're brought together to be there with people, it's a worshipful experience. So you asked me the question, why did I get it started? I'd like to tell you it's an altruistic or just a completely a wonderful motive. And that of course with too many things in my life is not the case, but God worked through that. And I got to experience the joy of God by being there with Inklings.
Yeah. Well, and thanks for, being authentic with that. And so one thing I wanted to say too was you do a good job of making everyone feel like we're the only one in the room. So I remember going into your house, you were very intentional, as you mentioned, about setting that up and being fully present with everyone there. How do you get that way? Like, how can you, as a former CEO and of a large company, how can you make people feel like you are really present with them when you really don't know them? Like that's a gift. So how can you do that? Because I've experienced that firsthand of being that new guy going to Inklings, and then you're just like really good at looking at people in the face and in the eye and asking questions. And so where did that come from? How did you get good at that? Any tips or reflections on that trait of yours?
Well, that's a great encouragement that you'd say that. So thank you. I want to be that. I want to love on other people. And I experience great joy from that. It kind of comes back to the motives again a little bit before, and I was actually talking to my youngest son this morning about this, is that when we're in a situation where there's a lot going on, where we'd otherwise normally be on the defensive, when you have so many different people coming to your house, it's almost like, boom, you could get kind of pushed back from it. Or if you go to a meeting with like 30 people, I mean, it's just kind of like almost overwhelming. And what I really like doing is I like leaning in. And for me, I like to really like to be present with a person because I get more out of it that way. When I love on other people, first off, I find everybody else very interesting. I have an opportunity during 5 or 10 minute interaction with somebody to be able to understand what God is doing through somebody's life. The question I like to ask is, what's the coolest thing going on right now? What's the most interesting thing? What's the thing that you're most excited about? And I really want to know. I'm really interested. I mean, what a highlight. You get a person whose entire life is in front of you, all of their experience, all the things, their hopes and their dreams and their ambitions, to understand what makes an individual tick, and for them to share that with you is an incredible gift. It's an amazing thing. It's a special privilege. And so for that 5 or 10 minutes, I get a chance to, instead of just like, oh my goodness, there are all these people that I've got to know or something like that, I get excited about being able to see, to hear what somebody's most excited about. And and as I've found out that as I lean in, I enjoy it. and I get to see what somebody's excited about. And that to me is just actually really super cool. I really enjoy that. And again, I don't know that I'm always as conscious of this, but if my greatest desire in life is to know God and enjoy him forever, aside from his word and the Holy Spirit, I experience God through relationship with other people. And what God is saying to other people and how they're experiencing him allows me to experience him more fully. And I think that it's that selfish motive that allows me to lean in and have a real genuine interest in what he's doing through the lives of others.
Hmm. That's interesting way you put it. So yeah, a selfish desire in a positive way. Like you selfishly want to know what God's doing in other people's lives.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, I struggle with this question about why do I do what I do for a long time. And, I came to Christ at age 28. Faith became a big part of my life. And ostensibly for the next 10 or 15 years, why, if somebody would say, well, why do you do what you do? Well, I would say that, well, I want to honor God. I want to do the right thing. And, different things like that. And then I realized after a while that that motive didn't completely ring true. There's too much of a selflessness in what I would tell people was my real motive. And every time I'd say, well, I want to bring God glory in the marketplace, that would be my kind of stable answer. It was every time I said it, there's a little conviction in my heart, and it didn't feel like it really completely resonated. It wasn't until I really came to understand what is oftentimes referred to as the reason for living that is offered up by the Westminster Catechism, that I finally found that it really resonated with who I am. And they say that the chief end of man is to know God and enjoy him forever. There's a selfishness that is baked in there. And as I lean into that, I enjoy God. I know God and I enjoy more. God designed me to be in relationship with others, for me to be able to experience him. And when I can genuinely care about what somebody else is doing, I experience God's love that in a way that transcends his selfishness. It's not purely formed. I mean, I'm a venture capitalist. I'm not a theologian. So I'm stumbling a little bit here at getting the right words, but there is something about, as I lean in, which was an unnatural thing for me to do at the beginning, I have found that I experience great joy and peace. And as I struggle with, well, why is that? I don't know that it's necessarily just a way that I was wired. I think it is that what is God created in me to search him out and to know him, that is satisfied somewhat in my interaction with others, especially if it is something.
Oh, I think I put you on mute there.
I went on mute. Sorry about that. I don't know that automatically happened. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does. I was going to ask where that desire came from, but it sounds like you came across that.
I stumbled into it. And so many other things in my life are trial and error. And I came to understand that I spent so much of my life in transactional relationships with people, which is, we have a great friend, one of my very best friends in the world is a guy named Tim Oakley, who says, at the base end of man is, we're always selling something to somebody. He loves that. It's hilarious. There's some aspect of my relationships all to this day that are transactional, but it wasn't, but my first 35 or 40 years of life was more characterized by having transactional relationships and having the emptiness and the hollowness that accompanies it. It wasn't until I really started leaning in and really understanding that when I have this 5 or 10 minutes, when I'm meeting with somebody and talking to them, that I have an opportunity to see God, and through them, that I get a joy in it, and allows me to actually really want to know. I really want to know what you're doing. And that's a special privilege, to allow somebody into your life for 5 or 10 minutes to talk about what God's doing through your life and sharing that with somebody else. There's a special privilege you allow them. On the flip side, when you're hearing that, you need to lean into that and embrace it for the gift that it is.
So I love that. And then how do you balance out being authentically interested in someone in front of you in a divine way versus that transactional way. Because, hey, like in my previous life, I was trying to sell software development services to anyone that had a heartbeat.
Yeah.
so, so it helped me, to better understand that, and maybe other the guys is, so you have that 5 to 10 minutes, maybe in that social setting. Hey, they're all believers. And then what about in the context of at work, or maybe they're in sales? Do you have any tips around how to do that when when you have that venture capitalist hat on and you're in a sales meeting or in a negotiation, that you still try to have that same mindset of being there that may relate to this conversation?
I don't know. It's everything I've done in life is this trial and error and trying to understand what brings joy and peace. And I think of what brings real joy and peace are the things that are the things that please God. And for me, again, my recommendation is that we lean into everything whenever we're with somebody, to lean in and to love on them. And when we love them, it's infinitely more rewarding than you'd think. And again, for the first 40 years of my life, I was with lots of people. Beginning the interactions I would say were best characterized as being transactional. And there's a hollowness to my life and something that I didn't truly enjoy. And it was more along the lines of, dear Lord, help me during this time to be selfless. Help me to love this person. Help me to actually really care what they say. Lord, help me to remember it. And then you do that 4 or 5 times and you start experiencing the type of joy and the peace. And then you just, it's pattern recognition. When I actually genuinely cared about that person, it was pretty special. I felt really good, not proud about myself like I did it. I just actually enjoyed my interaction with that person. There's some amount of it that was disarming. They don't have a lot of times when they meet with somebody when that person seems to really have a genuine care, actually is interested. When that happens, that's a special thing. There's an intimacy there. We're to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourself. We want to be known. We want to be cared for. We want to be loved. And when you get a chance to do that, even in just a brief interaction, it's a special thing.
So for those of us that haven't maybe done that trial and error experiment like you're describing there, Henry, would there be a book or a scripture that you'd recommend guys to start with, to say, hey, this is how I can start to develop that habit?
Oh, geez. I don't know. So often times what will happen is when I'll tell you, I don't know if the greatest commandment to know God, love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, love our neighbors ourselves is obviously a great start. Trying to abide in Christ and trying to just understand, the life of Christ and, is important. But another thing that a lot of times that really shapes my life is, what are my inputs right now? For me, it's not a book. And I wouldn't say there's a book that shaped my life, largely because I rarely read. I do listen to some sermons and listen to some podcasts. I'll tell you real quickly what a podcast or a sermon that I'm listening to right now that really is getting me and really helping to refine the work that God is doing through me. And it is a sermon by a guy named Toby Kurth here in a church in San Francisco, and it's called Shaping Your Desires. And he effectively in it goes through Rene Girard's mimetic theory, which is a theory and philosophy about the fact that we imitate things. And from birth, we're always imitating things. And the things that we imitate, the things we emulate, the things we want to be like are the things that shape our desires. And then that characterizes our life. And there's so much in it. And for me, it's a renewed quest to really understand, again, these motives and these whys. Why am I doing what I'm doing in these different interactions? Why Why do I desire this? Why am I thinking along these lines? And is my life shaped by a desire to be more Christ-like and then emulate the behaviors and the postures and the attitudes of Jesus, who was selfless? I mean, selfless and obedient, including death and death on a cross. I mean, he lived and served for other people to find the life that really meant something. So how do I serve other people? How do I have as my root identity being this beloved child of God? How do I have as a root of my identity being that's who I am, and that no matter how successful I am, and I could be successful in a ton of transactions, but that doesn't change who God sees me as. Those are the different types of things that really shape things. So, if I'm struggling with how do I be there with somebody, and how do I look to be selfless, and how do I look to really give, so much of it is really born not from the different practices we use to be there or to be in relationship, but really is what is at our root and our core. What is our identity? Who are we? And what shapes our desires? If we believe that we're a beloved child of God, and our desires are to be more like him and to know him more fully, everything flows from that. And having genuine relationships with people where you really care and seek to serve them become easy and become second nature. And I offer this up as if you put me up as if I've got this nail. Well, not exactly, but made it sound like I'm really good at it. A whole bunch of different things I struggle with all the time. Way too many of my relationships are still transactional. But I've come over the course of a period of time to just understand that dynamic in my life, and the evil that might otherwise come out of my heart. I've come to understand it more. And my identity, through the grace of God, I understand my identity more. And my desires are being shaped to be more Christ-like more and more. And I'm discovering more and more joy and peace because of it. And out of that, I do have the incredible privilege of having better relationships and better interactions with people.
Well, I'm grateful that you are trying this out, even if it's a weakness as you think. If you didn't do that experiment with Inklings, if you didn't do that experiment with this interview, or helping out with the fellowship, it's just a good example of showing up, being present, sharing your life, and so thank you for that. Is there anything that we didn't get a chance to that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share about this idea of being there before we go?
No, I can't think of anything. I forgot we were going to talk about being there. But I'm glad that we did. I'm grateful to you for the opportunity to talk about it, because the message that I share is something that I need to hear and I need to apply today. I'm gonna get out there. It's still morning out here. I'm gonna have a whole bunch of meetings with different people today, and you gave me great encouragement. You saw something in my life that you thought was good, and because of our interaction this morning, allows me to be more engaged with those people, and to be able to give the Heisman to the otherwise feelings of having maybe cursory or more efficient interactions with people, and to see the interactions, the people that God would put in my path today, as opportunities to really love on them and then experience God more fully. So I will do that better today because of the time we had this morning. So I'm thankful. Thank you.